Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another Reddit Stories video. And I have a very exciting video for you guys today. Unexplainable True Reddit Stories. This is one of my favorite videos I have made so far. Every single story in this video is so interesting, scary, and just as the title says, unexplainable. But I'm super excited to get in this video, and I'm sure you'll love them as well, all the stories on it. And this video is perfect to listen to when you're studying, sleeping, or just want to watch a video or just want to listen to something. But this video is perfect for that. And also, before we get into the video, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It's the channel's goal to be at 10,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and I think we can do it, so please subscribe. And all right, without further ado, let's get into some unexplainable true Reddit stories. And then I looked up. I'm a police officer in the southern US, in a suburban department of about 100 sworn officers. I work in a college town. I've been on about 10 years now, made sergeant 4 years ago, but at the time of this story, I was just 2 years on working night shift patrol. I've been lucky that not a lot has affected me mentally anyway, during my career. I don't have kids, that's how it gets to you usually. You can build all the mental walls you want, but when you have an emotional connection with your kids and see something happen to kids, the walls mean nothing. Anyway, this one stuck with me. Still makes my hair stand on end, especially when it rains. It was September, just after midnight. I could put on a call of shots fired. Now, normally, these calls turn out to be either fireworks or perhaps a car backfiring, but mostly fireworks. So unless we get multiple calls on it, or a confirmed gunman, or someone confirmed wounded, we just send one unit. That night, it was me. The shots fired was reported around a college football stadium. This was during football season, so there were a bunch of really big white tents set up all around the parking lots for tailgaters. I notified dispatch that I was on scene and started rolling through the parking lots, casting my spotlight here and there. It was raining pretty heavily and hard to see. About halfway through the lots, my spotlight illuminated the silhouette of a man sitting in a folding chair under one of those big tents. I pulled closer and lit him up and notified dispatch that I was out with one in the parking lot. His back was to me. He appeared to be hunched forward, as if his elbows were on his knees and his head leaning forward. I walked towards him and started calling out to him. Can't remember exactly what I said, but something like, "Hey man, you okay? You heard anything strange? Can you come talk to me?" He didn't move or answer. As I drew closer, I lit him up with my flashlight. I then noticed the outline of a shotgun on the pavement next to him. Combined with him not answering and the nature of the call, it was enough for me to break leather and have dispatch hold the channel. I kept calling to him as I approached, asking him to show me his hands, etc. 30 feet, 20 feet, 10 feet. My handgun, Glock Model 22, has a Streamlight TLR-1 light on it, so I had him lit up. 6 feet, under the tent with him. 5 feet, 4 feet. I close on him, come around to the front of him. Shotgun suicides are difficult. Often, if they put the barrel under their chin, the blast from the barrel will blow the gun out from under the chin before the shot ever hits them. There was a guy in my hometown that succeeded in a shotgun suicide only because he did it in front of a pond. Put the barrel under his chin, pulled the trigger, only managed to blow his face off. Coroner said he probably ran around screaming through the hole that used to be his mouth before he drowned in the pond. This guy succeeded, blew his head clean off. You do this job long enough, you notice funny little details. His elbows were indeed resting on his knees. It was as though he blew his head off, set the shotgun on the ground next to him, and then leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees to think about what he had done. About that time, I noticed that even though I was under the tent with him, it felt like it was still raining. And then I looked up.
I'm the sole survivor of a roller coaster that couldn't be stopped for 12 hours last year. I learned a lesson I will never forget. Trust your gut. I had the day off from work. I wanted to do something fun, but everyone I knew was busy. Makes sense, I mean, it was a Tuesday. I decided I'd just go to the amusement park by myself. I've done before and had a great time. I'm a bit of a thrill seeker. Well, not too much anymore. Going 5 miles over the speed limit is about all the excitement I want out of life anymore. I got to the park around 2 p.m. It was slow, even for a Tuesday. It gave me a sense of excitement because I knew I'd be able to ride a lot of rides without having to be there all day. At the same time, it gave me a weird, uncanny feeling. All this space and not enough people to fill it up. I ignored the feeling and moved on. I don't know about you, but whenever I go to an amusement park, I like to work my way up to the really crazy rides. I'll just start small and finish off the day with my favorite. My favorite just happened to be called the Grim Reaper. It feels a little too on the nose, doesn't it? It was 7:30 p.m. and the park closed at 8:30. I knew it was time to get in line for my final ride. I also made a new friend while there. We met standing in line at one of my first rides of the day. We decided after chatting the whole time in line that we'd hang out for the rest of the day. His name was Charlie. We agreed on every ride that day except for the last. He wanted to end the night on the Mind Bender, but after some convincing, aka the Mind Bender's line was way shorter while passing by, we decided to do the Grim Reaper last. We got in line for the Grim Reaper and there was hardly anyone in line. It made sense given that it was almost closing time. "Do you think they will let us ride multiple times if the line stays down?" Charlie said with his hands clasped excitedly in front of him. I just smiled at him and chuckled. Normally, I would have been excited too, but something in my gut felt so off. For some reason, I didn't want to go out on one of my favorite rides. Maybe it was the 5 corn dogs I ate a couple hours earlier, I figured. I'm a very rational person. I wasn't the kind of person to let anxiety or worry rule over me. I always thought life was just what you made of it. When we got in line, there were about 60 people, give or take. The people in front of us did their ride, and 30 of us were left in line. People started looking at the time and saying they were tired and just getting out of line. By the time it was our turn, only 19 people were in line. I knew the ride well enough to remember that it held 20 people, so if no one else got in line, they really might let us go multiple times. I really didn't want that, though. Honestly, I felt even more compelled to get out of line after all those others did, too. I didn't want to seem lame to my new friend if I wanted to get off the coaster after one ride. The time came for us to get on the ride. My heart was pounding faster than it ever had. I wondered if I was all worked up because I watched Final Destination 3 with a friend a couple weeks back, but I wasn't having visions of the terrible fate we would all face. I was just feeling off. I seriously considered just telling Charlie that I didn't feel great after the last ride, but I finally found someone with my taste in roller coasters. I didn't want to let him down. We were towards the back of the line, so we didn't have much to say in where we sat. We ended up in the third car from the front. I was just happy we weren't in the front car. As you get on the Grim Reaper, it plays a cheesy little jingle. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, the Grim Reaper will find you, dead or alive, with music in the background that always sounded so dumb in the past. I couldn't believe it was getting to me. Charlie even hummed along to it while grabbing my arm with happiness. We got in our seats, and an employee came by and pulled down the metal bar restraint. There's a harness in our seats. It was the kind that strapped you individually over your shoulders. I'm on the chubbier side, but I can always fit into coaster seats. I've never been told I couldn't go on a ride. I'm just sometimes a little snug. It's actually kind of nice because I kind of feel secure. As we got strapped in, I felt the plastic-coated metal hit my shoulders and chest. It should have given me a sense of comfort and safety, but I just felt trapped. The employee walked to the station at the infamous big button that starts the ride. He flashed us all a thumbs up and yelled, "Ready for the Reaper?" Everyone raised their hands and let out an excited scream, except for me. I let out a large sigh, counting down the seconds, trying to imagine Charlie and I once we were off the ride and how happy we'd be. The employee hit the button, and we were off. The coaster shot out of the loading station like we were a bullet being shot out of a gun.
After that, it started on a relatively slow ascent up to a point to a drop-off at a 60-degree angle. A couple of twists and turns, a big loop, and some more twists and turns. About halfway through the ride, I was enjoying myself. I was just thinking about how the hard part was done and I was safe. Just a little anxiety was all. We were rounding our last bend when a sense of relief came over me. I could see the end of the ride. I was almost done. But the ride didn't start to slow down. Normally, the coaster starts to slowly come to a full stop several hundred feet from the end, but it was still going. As we passed by the loading area, I saw the operators look confused as we raced by. I noticed no one else was waiting in line. Someone screamed, "One more time!" and everyone on board gave an excited response. Everyone except for me. Charlie looked over at me and grabbed my wrist. "Yes! I knew they would let us keep going! This is awesome!" He let out an excited yelp as we reached the climb to the drop. He was beaming with joy the whole rest of the lap. We passed by our loading area once again, but this time, the coaster operator had a couple of other people standing with them. The operator who strapped us in looked red and worried as we were whipped by. The employees for our third ride of the day, the other riders were divided. Some were still excited, screaming, "Let's go one more time," or "Best day ever." Some people started to sound scared. Not everyone noticed the employees looking frazzled. I can promise you one thing, I noticed. We started going up the incline again. This was the slowest part of the ride, at around 10 miles per hour and slowing down a little as it reached its peak. This gave us the opportunity to take a breath or try to talk, although it was only for about 20 seconds. "Are we stuck?" I said nervously to Charlie. "I'm sure we're fine. There's just a malfunction with the electrical system not activating the brakes or something. There's always a manual shutoff." He was cut off and we went down the steep hill. We passed by yet again, this time with more people looking worried and someone standing close to where the coaster would go by. He tried to yell at us as we went by, but we couldn't really understand him. Maybe something about them working on getting us off. This time, as we zoomed by, everyone was scared and starting to panic. I guess it didn't sink in for some people what was happening until right now. We went around a fifth time and everything remained the same. On the sixth time, we were at the peak and saw a fire truck coming into the parking lot from the top of the incline. We had a perfect view of the parking lot along with the side of a highway a little further out, and took 2 more loops around the track by the time the fire department got to us. Not just them, but police officers and ambulances. It started to scare me. Why did they get ambulances? Is it just protocol, or is there more to this? Someone came in a few minutes later with a big whiteboard that they used to write messages to us. The ride was too loud when passing by them to hear anything, so this was their only way to talk to us. It must have been the 12th or 13th time around when the whiteboard read, "Trying to free you at peak." I knew they couldn't write a novel for us, because you can only read so much while going so fast. But come on, people. What is that supposed to mean? I think they just wanted to tell us that they're working on a way to get us down, but it didn't matter. We've been on this ride for nearly 30 minutes and we felt sick and our bodies hurt like crazy.
A couple loops after that, we saw a fire truck trying to get underneath where the top of the ascend was. Luckily, there was a large space where the truck could pull right beside it. Unfortunately, at its peak, it's about 200 feet in the air. It also doesn't have any emergency exits at the top like most coasters do. You'd think that'd be a requirement, but what do I know? We saw the fire truck start to expand the ladder that comes out of the top, but it wasn't even close. We waited for the firefighters to try and figure out a solution to save us, as the audience below us was watching us like we were some kind of show. It was close to 45 minutes when the first death occurred, then one more soon after. There was a skinnier guy in the car behind me. I heard him talking about trying to slip out of the seat restraint which secured him to his seat. The other guy he was with told him it was a bad idea. So did I.
The next time he went up the ascent, he began violently wiggling and thrashing back and forth to the point where people thought he was going to throw up or fall off the ride. He managed to wiggle about halfway out right at the top, but, well, it didn't end very well. His leg got caught on a part of the track and yanked the rest of his body out of the bar restraint. It sent his body crashing down towards the earth. However, I think he was dead soon after he was ripped out of his seat. I didn't see too much of it. The guy who was beside him let out an insane screech. Hearing that kind of agony as you were feeling the harsh effects of gravity hitting on your chest while going down a steep hill was truly mortifying. The screech out of nowhere stopped, and more people screamed. The man beside him had a heart attack. I could hear the symphony of moans and crying coming from the crowd watching us. I couldn't hear them before because of how loud the ride was, but they were terrified of what they saw. Police tried to escort them out of the park, but it didn't stop people from parking on the side of the road to watch and record on their phones. Made me feel disgusted. At around an hour on the ride, everyone stopped screaming or trying to talk to each other. It seemed like everyone accepted their fate. My nails were deeply embedded into Charlie's wrist. I couldn't scream anymore due to my throat feeling raw from the yelling. Even if I wanted to, I probably couldn't. My voice had given out. I saw that I drew a little blood on Charlie, but he was too out of it to notice. He, along with a few other people, were incredibly sick. He threw up probably 5 times at this point. Looked cross-eyed. Around that time, the electricity in the whole park shut down. All the lights, everything. I think they were hoping a hard reboot of the whole park would stop the ride. The coaster didn't just rely on gravity, but also on a lot of help from motors and other electronic elements. It all turned off when we were on the straightaway. Of course, it still didn't stop. I could hear someone yelling with frustration, not understanding how it could still be moving if it didn't have an electrical source. After 2 hours, they let some family members come into the loading area, which is a terrible idea. We're doing our best to keep cool and stay calm. Our family is watching us zooming by them every 2 minutes and absolutely screaming at us made it so much worse. My mom was my first family member to show up. Don't get me wrong, I love my mom, but she's very stubborn and wanted something done, even though they had already tried everything. Of course, it was just because she wanted me safe, but it was stressing me out. The firefighters put down a safety net underneath the ascend. It was still quite a jump. If we could even get out and successfully land on it, it might be okay. But we're all a little scared from what happened before. It seemed like they put it out just in case someone tried to get out again. It didn't seem like it was the plan to have us all just jump out of that moving death machine. They weren't desperate enough at that point.
We saw a large group of people passionately arguing and yelling at each other. From what I could tell, it was made up by family members, firefighters, and some employees of the park. I'm sure with lots of varying opinions. The ride was on hour 3 when the coaster entered the loading area once again. I saw a woman run over to the control panel. A couple of people ran over to her and told her to stop and not press the buttons. She was screaming her head off and wailing. It had been hard to understand people in the past while going by them, but this was as clear as day as we passed by. I could tell she was starting to break free from the grip of people holding her back. I wasn't too worried. Whatever button she was wanting to press, I'm sure it wouldn't work since none of the others worked so far. We were about 5 seconds away from going down the descent when we heard a click come from all our seats. The woman hit the button that unlocked all our overhead seat belts. Of course, the seatbelt button worked, but not the button to stop the ride. A few people reacted fast enough to either jump out or snap it back over themselves. As the ride went down, others weren't so lucky. 3 people managed to jump out but didn't survive the fall, despite there now being a giant net to catch anyone who's dumb enough to try and get out that high. One person hit a support beam on the way down, and the other 2 landed wrong when they hit the net. Their bodies folded in an unnatural manner as they hit. All 3 died instantly. I would say around half of us that were left managed to get the seatbelt secured before going down the hill. Everyone else had to hold on for dear life, and unfortunately, I was one of them. I felt my stomach start to drop as I reached up to grab the only thing that would keep me from becoming a part of the pavement below. The restraint wasn't completely useless at that point. I just had a good 12 inches in between my chest and the restraint. As I dug my fingers into the plastic, I hoped I'd be fine. Then the ride dropped. I felt my butt lift off the seat I'd become so familiar with. I tried to wrap my ankles around the floor of the coaster to keep the rest of my body from flying out. Charlie, luckily, got his restraint down, so he was trying to get his leg over mine and hold me down with his arm. After the longest 5 seconds of my life, I managed to pull it back down over my chest. I wasn't sure who else got theirs down, but I assumed from how scared a few of them sounded, it wasn't good. All I could think about and look at was the big loop coming up. As we got closer, I could hear swearing from multiple passengers, including someone in front of me. She was violently pulling at the restraint, but it wasn't budging. I was hoping and praying that the centrifugal force would keep her in her seat as we went down the big loop. I closed my eyes. I knew I didn't want to see what was about to happen. I heard multiple people screaming and making horrendous cracking sounds. I don't have an exact number, but I would say around 7 people were left. I could see the 2 people in the very front row, and Charlie, beside me. I recall only hearing 3 other voices behind me at this point. At hour 5, 3 more people died while on the ride. 2 of them from a heart attack or something. The third person, well, he watched the person beside him suddenly die while going around one of the bends. He yelled out in anger and well, I'd actually rather not go into detail, but he died soon after. I saw the whole thing. There were 2 people left in front of me, and Charlie. At hour 6, we saw a group of people bringing in what looked like another large net, except that it was in the loading area. The next time we looped around, they wrote something new on the big whiteboard. We're going to try and stop it manually. I had no clue what this meant, but by the look of the net, I was terrified. The next pass, there were people on both sides of the loading area. On one side, the net was wrapped around a large pole that had somehow been fastened into the concrete slab. I saw a large similar pole on the other side, but the net wasn't yet attached. As we zoomed by, I could hear people trying to rush and hurry behind us.
We were running around one of the turns, and I cranked my neck looking to see what plan they had in mind. They were frantically trying to tie the other side of the net to the support beam that was freshly drilled into the ground. I couldn't believe how stupid these people were. How on earth did they think this was a good idea? Was this a last-ditch attempt? I was yelling at them and telling them to stop, but of course they couldn't hear me. Even if they could, they wouldn't listen. They're trying to get at least someone out of this alive. Maybe the owner of the park wanted all of us to die so that no one could publicly talk about the horrific things we went through. As we went past the last bend, the hundreds of people watching the spectacle cheered, clapped, and celebrated, somehow not seeing any of the flaws with this terrible plan. We were on the straightaway and my heart started to pound again. The few seconds before we hit the net felt like slow motion. I swore I could see everyone's face. They looked happy. I couldn't believe it. Made me upset because I knew they were all about to be very disappointed. Finally, we hit the net. Of course, it was no match for a giant metal contraption hitting it. The metal pole was ripped out of the concrete slab and smashed down right in between our car and the one behind us. As we headed for the incline, we tried to get the net that had attached itself to us off the coaster. Luckily, we were able to get it off of us, but no luck with the metal beam that was now awkwardly lodged into the coaster. As we started going down, the whole ride started to shake violently. It felt like we were going to fly off the track. We made it to the first turn, and I heard a loud snap and 2 screams. The 7 coaster cars behind us broke off, and the metal beam found its way underneath as we turned. I watched in disbelief as the cars behind us all went flying off the tracks. At this point in the ride, it was about 50 feet off the ground, still enough to kill them. I wasn't fast enough to close my eyes and saw the whole thing. It went off the track like it had wings and suddenly plummeted down into the earth. The screaming immediately stopped when the ride landed upside down. My imagination filled in the blanks and I shuddered at the thought of the carnage below me. And then there were 2. We were hoping that somehow the ride would stop or slow down because we lost the back 7 cars. I wasn't sure what the logic was, but we were desperate at this point. After another hour, it was not showing any signs of slowing down. Once we made it to hour 8, we accepted our fate. I was hoping that this would all be over soon and we could just be done. I don't think either one of us thought we'd get off. We just hoped at this point that our deaths would be quick. Over the next couple hours, we noticed a piece of metal on the car ahead of us start to wobble and loosen. I'm not sure if it was just the wear and tear of the ride going for so long or the whole net fiasco. It kept looking like it was about to come loose and we'd duck out of the way. We were imagining the worst possible outcome, thinking it would fly off and decapitate one of us. Eventually, it did come off, but it wasn't as dramatic a moment like we thought it would be. It was so much worse. Instead of coming all the way off, it only partially came off and started grinding loudly against the track. We heard an audible cringing sound from everybody watching below. The sound was horrendous. The thin strip of metal started to find its way underneath the car. Charlie was worried it would dislodge the coaster from its track like we saw just hours before. He told me he was going to try and grab it. I begged him not to. After a few laps of me telling him to just leave it, he made up his mind and contorted his body to try and grab the sharp metal. I couldn't see his hand as he reached down forward, but I could see his face. Somehow that made it worse. His expression quickly changed from focused to shocked in a matter of seconds. His face went blank. I heard screaming but had no clue what was going on. He lifted up his arm, and I don't think I'll ever be able to get the image of what used to be his arm out of my head. When he gripped the metal, it slipped and went deep into his forearm.
I tried to grab his shoulder to calm him down, but to my shock, he was calm. He was more silent at that moment than he had been the whole day. He wouldn't even look at me. He was almost mesmerized by the sight of his bloody, disfigured arm. I felt lightheaded and had a ringing in my ears watching the blood start to make its way down his entire body, then to me and the floor of the coaster. It was making me feel sick watching the blood move around the car as we ran on the twists and turns of the ride. Within minutes, Charlie looked like a ghost. I did my best to try and wrap his arm up with the shreds of my shirt, but it was completely pointless. I don't think an old t-shirt can help when you could see the bone. I tried to talk to him. I tried to make him feel as comfortable as I could, but it was no use. He was fading in and out of consciousness. He began going up the ascent, and he finally looked over at me. I couldn't begin to explain all that I saw in his eyes. I could see the pain and sadness, but also the relief. He knew he was going to die, but I don't think he cared. He gave me a weak nod of the head and looked ahead. When we went down the hill, I tried to keep a close eye on him this lap, but it was honestly hard to look at him. I heard him take a deep breath right before the loop. When we finished the loop, I looked over at him and, well, he was gone. I was now left alone in this death trap. I never imagined it could have gotten any worse, but having a dead body sitting next to you on a roller coaster is not something I would recommend. I was sitting in shock next to my dead friend for a couple hours. I was frozen in fear, not wanting to even think of a way out. After gaining some courage, I contemplated my next move. I came back into reality and realized the coaster was going just slightly slower. It wasn't significant, but if the loops were taking just slightly longer than before, that damp piece of metal that killed Charlie must have made its way underneath and not derailed it, but slowed it down. I ended up taking off my shoes and Charlie's shoes. I had a plan that was probably dumb, but if I died, at least it would be in my hands. As I went by the loading area, the coaster started to slow down just before the ascent. I threw all 4 shoes right in front of the ride. A part of a shoe caught the truck in just the right spot. The ride was still. I could feel the coaster almost pulsing, trying to move with all its might. I was sore. My shoulders were badly bruised by the shoulder restraints repeatedly hitting me over and over again. My whole lower half ached from sitting in a hard seat for hours on hours. I took a deep breath and squeezed in my gut like I never had before. I let out a horrific yell as I forced my body out of the restraint that had been holding me down for at least 12 hours, around 360 times around the track. My heart was racing as I felt the coaster start to win the battle to move again. I managed to squeeze out just seconds before it took off. I was freed and jumped. Luckily, I just barely hit the net below.
I also managed to hit the net so I didn't hurt myself too badly. Nothing is worse than what the ride already did to me. I laid on the net looking up into the sky in disbelief. I was still. I wasn't moving. It was almost making me feel motion sick not moving, like when you were reading a book in the car and you look up after an hour. Everything was blurry. I could barely hear the faint sound of people trying to get to me, but it was mostly just my ears ringing and my heart beating. After just a few minutes, I was down. They immediately rushed me to the ER where I stayed for 3 weeks. I sustained a broken rib, a broken collarbone, severe bruising, and a concussion, just to name a few. Not to mention the mental trauma. I'm writing this as I'm feeling ready to finally tell my story. This is the first time I'm digging back into my memories and recollecting the whole experience. I've started to work through all this with a therapist, and it's made me realize I need to get it all out of my system. Don't bother trying to find anything about the story. The owners of the park have done a suspiciously good job hiding it. It's another reason I want to get my story out there. They have completely scrubbed the internet of it. Somehow. Although talking with a professional has helped, there are still some sounds and images that I can just never completely get out of my head. If you take one thing from my story, I say you should trust yourself. Even if you don't believe in a higher power or gut instincts, if you have a feeling, trust it. Please. Home alone with my old dog. Although it doesn't seem like it, this happened quite a while back, probably over 10 years. I was in the later years of high school and was home alone. My parents were at a wedding that required them to stay at a hotel. My brother worked the night shift at that time. My family lived in a very well-known East Coast city in a blue-collar neighborhood that was starting to take a nosedive. As a teenager, I was a loner. I wasn't a nerd or anything. I was a big dude who had friends and went on dates, but I'm a natural introvert, so I cherish the rare alone time that I got. This weekend, I was looking forward to engaging in my normal empty house routine. Play some PlayStation on the big screen TV, then order a late takeout dinner, pizza or Chinese, and pig out while watching some Dragon Ball Z. Then around 2 a.m., fall asleep on the couch with my old dog Cecil. Cecil was a beagle who was as old as the hills and had been in our family about 8 years. He was quiet and peaceful and spent his time begging for food and sleeping. Unlike most beagles, Cecil never howled or barked. He was more content to rest his head on your lap and spend the night there. Anyway, back to the story. It's approximately 1 a.m. I just finished the last slice of pizza and was dozing off on the couch when I hear a bang coming from the back alleyway. I didn't think much of it. Anyone who's lived in a city knows noise happens at all moments of the night. Cecil's head popped up off my lap and the hair on his back stood up. He was always a bit skittish, so I calmed him down and started dozing off again. Not more than 2 minutes later, I hear another bang, and Cecil did something I never seen him do before. He leapt off the couch and ran like the wind towards the door leading to the basement, barking and growling like a dog twice his size. The look on his face reminded me of a German Shepherd canine unit. I'd never seen him like that before, which got my adrenaline pumping. Through the dog's barking, I could now make out a persistent banging. There was a seldom used door in the basement that led to our back alleyway. It was old and rusted and was hard to open even with the key, and it made a lot of noise. I suddenly realized that someone was trying to break into my house through my basement door. Quick little bit of context for anyone who hasn't lived in a bad neighborhood. If someone tries to get into your house and moves on after they realize the door is locked, they want your stuff. If someone is persistently trying to get into your house despite the door being locked, well, they want you. Knowing this, I rush upstairs to grab the heavy wood baseball bat that I keep under my bed for situations like this. Then I head down to my basement. I probably should have ran, but I was a macho teenager with a tough guy complex, and plus I had nowhere to go. While I'm heading down the stairs of my basement, Cecil blows past me with the speed and aggression of a dog half his age. Suddenly, I hear a man's voice say, "Oh shit," and the banging stopped. I didn't call the cops or anything, which is probably the dumbest thing I ever did. I just sat up for the rest of the night with a bat in my hand. My brother came home that morning and I told him what had happened. We went to the basement door to take a look and we gave it a tug to open it. The whole door fell off.
The psycho was one good shove away from getting in my house, but old Cecil scared him off. I'm pretty sure that lazy fat old dog saved my life. When I tell this story to people, they dismiss his actions as a dog doing what a dog was supposed to do. But when I tell you that Cecil never barked or moved that fast in his life, you can take it to the bank. It was almost like he knew the urgency, like he knew that door was going to give. After a few years, we had to have him put down because he just didn't have a will to live anymore. Before the injection, I got a moment alone with him. I thanked him one last time for his friendship and for what he did that night. At this point, I was a grown man with a wife and kids. I'm convinced none of that would have happened without old Cecil. Thanks, Val. I miss you. Being left alone at a house in the middle of the Mojave Desert. Back around 1992, I was in high school at the time. I was a sophomore, and unlike most of my friends in school, I didn't work the typical high school jobs like McDonald's, Taco Bell, some retail job in the middle of the mall, or work at the local grocery store. I was very good with my hands and worked jobs like construction, demolition, flooring, and auto mechanics. All of my contacts I worked under the cover as I started working on some of these jobs at 14. It was beneficial for both of us, as I was only called in when needed, and I was the guy who was only willing to work evenings and weekends.
One of my contracts worked doing remodeling projects, like at restaurants, bars, retail shops, and typical commercial projects, that we could only work after hours. Like I said, that worked out for both of us because I went to school and would sometimes work after school or weekends. For this one contact, it wasn't uncommon for him to leave me alone at a site and have a list of things for me to do alone, mostly demolition work. I did this while the other crew was doing the installation or remodeling work. I was the kid, but had their respect because I did what I was supposed to do and did the work of a man without complaints. I got paid good, and in one night I could make more than my friends did working all week at McDonald's. This one instance, I got a call from a guy I worked for, and he said he had a project for me, and if I could work the following Saturday. I said, yeah, sure. He said, be sure to bring food and lots to drink, as there was nothing nearby. I used to have a small cooler and fill it up with drinks like Coke, Gatorade, or whatever, plus chips and a couple sandwiches. Back then, I could eat a whole pizza by myself and burn it all off. He picked me up that Saturday morning as I didn't have a car or license yet, so he would pick me up and drive me to the sites for work and leave me alone there. I rarely worked with his other crews, as they were the more skilled labor guys. I was just the tear-out kid. Here's the part that was my major downfall to the story. I didn't pay attention to where we were going. I was too busy talking to him, and I think we were talking about cars. You see, at the time, my goal was to save up enough money to buy an old muscle car and rebuild it. It took a long time to arrive to the site. As we drove up, it was in the middle of nowhere. Now, you may not think California has places like this, but back in the early 1990s, out in the Mojave Desert, yes. It was big plots of land and homes more than a few city blocks apart. I knew we left the highway and went down a few other two-lane highways for a long distance. I remember he asked me about my drinks, and he pulled out a brand new jug of water that he had in his truck that looked like it had been there a while, and told me to take it with me just in case. He said that the water of the house I would be working at was off. As we pull up to the property, he is in a hurry. They drop off tools and get to the other work site, so I hurry up and help them with things like breaker bars, shovels, pry bar, hammer, brooms, several big trash bins, and a small tool bag that I often had with me. He tells me that he will be back to pick me up at about 5 to 6 p.m., as there's no electricity to the site either, plus it should only take me till then to do what I needed to do. That was always his way of saying, I'm only paying you till this time, so you better get everything done by then. It was never too outrageous, and we would always have a good understanding on time and tasks. He drove away, and I am on this property all alone. I walk into the house. It's mostly empty. My job was to remove all remaining furniture, contents, and appliances. Remove all the flooring, carpet, tile, and remove all the wood paneling. This project was going to be like what we now call a flip. They were going to fix it up and sell it almost immediately. I get kind of spooked by the place. It was very odd. Now, mind you, I am used to being on sites alone, working all night. This was the daytime, on a Saturday, and bright outside. However, the house was old, dark, musty, and kind of cool inside.
The kind of cool that gives you goosebumps. To add to the spook factor of the house, let me describe what I remember about the house. Imagine walking back in time to the 1960s or earlier. Dark green carpet that looked matted down, dark pine wood everywhere that had a darker stain to it. The wood paneling wasn't the kind used in the 1980s sheet paneling, but actual board paneling, tongue and groove. Old window curtains that all looked like someone's grandma made. Avocado green sink, stovetop, oven, and the stuff that was left behind like old furniture and a closet full of old stuffed animals that looked to be about 30 years old. The style of this house was like an old Western ranch, as there were wagon wheels inside and outside the house. I found an old battery-powered radio, but only could get a few stations, but was just happy for the noise. I started removing all the junk from the house, and as I normally did on a project, if there wasn't a dumpster on site, I made a trash pile. I tore up all the flooring. Next to my delight, everything seemed to come up with ease, and it was a rip, cut, and toss. I took a big demo hammer to the kitchen and tore it apart in less than an hour. I ended up using that big jug of water that my boss had given me to wash my hands and face periodically. But by late noon, as most you know, the desert, the dryness, also starts to take moisture from you, especially if you're working in it. So by late afternoon, I am down to my last drink, and I'd already ate everything I brought. No worries, I thought the guy should be here in a couple hours to pick me up. As the time gets closer for them to arrive, I'm all done with my tasks. I even swept the entire place, and it's now ready for the rehab crew to get to work making this place look modern. The time of year I was out here, it wasn't a typical hot desert day, but you know, in the desert, as soon as the sun goes down, it starts to cool rapidly. I had a flannel skirt, but that wasn't enough, and it was starting to get dark. This was the time before cell phones were common, and well, there was no electricity, water, and phone service to the house. I climbed up to get on the roof of the house to get a better look to see if I can see something in the distance. It looked like miles down. I saw a smaller road that was a dirt road that led to and a few homes, but those homes were all in the dark. My first thought was to hike down to the neighbor's house and ask them to use the phone. The nearest house I saw was a home, and this home also looked abandoned. If you remember, in the early 1990s was the start of a decline in the economy, a recession, so it wasn't uncommon for a lot of foreclosed homes in attractive homes. A lot of those I worked on at the time. I started to think about my options as darkness faster approached. One was to stay at the house until morning. 2, hike with the little water I had a few miles in the dark Mojave night. 3, wait until early morning and hike out of there to some sort of civilization. It also suddenly occurred to me that no one knew where I was except my boss. I don't know if he told anyone else where I was, and certainly my family wouldn't miss me until maybe Sunday night, but I didn't even tell them I was going to work there. They knew me and how much I would work to save up for my car, that they never worried about me not coming home. As full darkness was all around me, it was amazing looking out at the night sky, and lucky for me, the moon was bright. I didn't have a flashlight or any way to make a fire, even though I tried. I was going to make a small bonfire out of broken up construction debris. As the temperature started to fall, probably down to the low 40s, my only option was go back inside the empty, creepy house that somehow seemed even creepier sitting in the dark. At about 8 p.m., the batteries on my radio, which was my only source of little light and noise, started to die. I grabbed my old wooden chair and sit in the living room of this house facing the door. I'm starting to hear wind, odd noises, which I assume are animals in the distance, and what sounds like leaves cracking under feet. I'm starting to shiver from the cold, so I set off on trying to start a fire in the fireplace. Imagine like Tom Hanks in Castaway trying to make a fire. At least this is keeping my mind off my situation. Sitting in this living room next to the fireplace, the house seemed even darker than it should be. Mind you, in the daytime, the inside seemed dark, so with only the moonlight, I was pretty much sitting in complete darkness. My mind starts to play tricks on me. I am seeing shadows moving outside and inside the house. I'm also starting to hear someone talking, like whispers or something. I get up from my chair and yell out, "Hello?" And just as I do, I hear something fall from the other side of the house. I run over to the door and go outside again. At least in the moonlight, I can see better. But off in the distance, I hear noises and movement, but can't make it out. I have my tool pile by the edge of the house ready for when my boss picks me up, so I ran over there and grabbed Big Daddy. It was my big, heavy pry bar that I use in demo. I was ready to defend myself for who or what was out there. I have to keep moving because my undershirt and flannel skirt wasn't enough to keep me warm. The wind was also starting to pick up, and for as far as I could see, no lights around me. I didn't want to try and make it up on the house again out of fear of falling in the dark, but I get up on top of the gate just to try and gain a little bit of altitude to see if I see some house lights or car lights nearby. My mind went to these stories that circled around at the time about how people would come up to the Mojave Desert and bury bodies, how there were Satanist groups out here, and how people would go missing for no reason out here. Every noise had me on edge, and every shadow had my heart pounding.
Now, I knew no one was inside the house, but I swear I would hear noises from inside. I held it up on the front porch, looking in the living room window, expecting to see someone out at any moment. By around 11 p.m., I look at my watch, thinking this is going to be a long night, as all this stuff only happened since it got dark. I don't know how I'm going to make it another 6 hours till daybreak. I start thinking the moment it gets to be daybreak, like the moment light starts to appear on the horizon, I'm going to take the little water I had left and walk east. I knew going east I would eventually make it somewhere. The dirt road I was off of, I knew that direction led to a paved road. Closer to midnight, I'm wide awake. My eyes are fixed on the dirt road, thinking that any time now a car would come down it and maybe they can call for help for me. I remember casually turning to look back into the house, as all this time I keep hearing noises, but telling myself maybe a rat or some animal. I see a shadow of a person move from the kitchen to down the hall. I jump up from sitting down and was like, that is not an animal, that's a human. I start backing my way out of the front porch towards the pile and trip over debris and fall down on the ground. I get up and fall again. It was like something pushed me down, or my imagination, but all of a sudden these bright lights are coming closer to me as I'm laying on the ground. I jump up and it's my boss. He's looking at me like, what the heck are you doing? I was just so glad to see him. I wasn't mad or anything, just asked him what happened. He said that he was sorry, but he thought the other crew was coming to get me, and they thought he was coming, so no one actually came. He said it wasn't until later in the evening he asked the other crew leader about how far along I got, and he said, I didn't go get him. Well, it took him almost 2 hours from where they were working to come get me. He felt really bad and told me he was going to pay me for the entire time I was out there. He also grabbed a can of Coke from his cooler and asked me if I was thirsty, and I drank that all in one gulp. Once we got back towards civilization, he went through a fast food drive-thru, and I ate like I had never ate before. As he was driving me home, I asked him about the house. I told him how creepy it was. He said he didn't have any information on the house, only just what we were supposed to do. After that, I made sure to always keep extra batteries, flashlight, and double the amount of liquid. Something strange happened to me in Mount Rainier National Park, pictures included. I wanted to post this here to maybe get some feedback on something that happened while camping in and around Mount Rainier National Park yesterday. The circumstances around what happened are very foggy, as I have very limited recollection of what happened, as everything happened in a haze, but pictures that definitely prove that something, whatever it was, did in fact happen. Let me give some context. I, 23 male, went to a van life meetup in Enumclaw, Washington over the weekend. The city is close by Mount Rainier National Park, and because I had already made the trip, I figured I might as well camp overnight nearby the park in a dispersed camping spot in the forest. I bought some ingredients to make some carne asada tacos, downloaded some movies, and was ready for a nice, cozy evening in my van, something which I do on most weekends in various campsites around the state. I hiked around the campsite, which is very nice, save for the large amounts of trash which was littered about, which made me really sad. The trail led to 2 fire pits not too far from where I had parked, and ended at a quiet riverbank. It seemed like it was a spot that local teens might go to drink or smoke weed. There was even a log bench with the words 420 painted colorfully on its seat. I wasn't sure how recently people had been there, and there were open, half-drunk cans around the fire pits that seemed cold. I wasn't sure if this meant anything in the moment, but it was a bit on the warmer side outside, at around 70 degrees. I decided that it likely was an active camping site.
The spot wasn't terribly isolated. Every 30 minutes or so, someone would drive by to claim other campsites down the lonely fire road. Some trucks, and even an RV. People like me who looking to spend time out in nature and who don't want to shell out the extra cash for a campsite. After exploring the area, I went back to my van to start making dinner. I used a satellite communicator to check in with my friends and family, as I didn't have any service that deep into the forest. The sun was setting as I sat down to eat my tacos. I left my doors open to let the air flow, and the cool breeze felt amazing. But after eating and when it was quiet, I started noticing a sound in the distance. They sounded like gunshots, really, almost like cannon shots. Deep, rhythmic booms echoing in the valley every few seconds. What accompanied these sounds was a very distant, yet closer noise of a chainsaw in the distance. Now, neither of these noises are very uncommon to hear when camping on fire roads, to be honest. People in Washington love their guns. It wouldn't be unheard of for someone to use a chainsaw to cut down larger trunks into firewood. Some are fire ban be damned. I also saw some campers start to leave, including an RV, which is particularly unusual. Finding a campsite for an RV can be hard, but it's especially hard to find one at night. The rule is to always find camp before the sun sets, and the sun had only just disappeared from the sky. Something spooked them, and I wondered if I should follow their lead. However, I had unwashed dishes on the counter, and I was in no mood to move, and so I didn't. I did, however, triple-check that all my doors and windows were locked before drifting to sleep. That night can only be described as hazy and disorienting. I have very little memory of anything that happened, but the evidence that something had most definitely happened was very evident. I remember being awake in the pitch black of night, struggling to breathe. Not choking, my lungs were filling with air, but I remember the feeling of drowning. I remember the pleading desperation for air. I remember trying to see, with my sight being wholly consumed by the darkness in front of me. I have a memory of trying to punch out a window to no avail. I remember making my way to the side door of my van to open the door to breathe, and then I woke up in bed, and the sun was in the sky. I would have chalked this up to a really bad dream, but the damage around me was evident. There was definitely a struggle. Some of my window blinds were sliced and ruined. One of my windows had scratch marks from the inside. Even the air vent on my ceiling was obliterated from the inside. I didn't think I was ever capable of this. The van was well ventilated, so I'm unsure as to why I would have trouble breathing in the first place. My carbon monoxide detector was silent, and the van was well ventilated after cooking. I have no idea what possibly could have caused me to do this and ruined my lovely van. I saw no indication of any kind of forced entry, and all the damage was done from the inside by me trying to get out. I guess my knuckles were very sore, as were my feet, as I probably hit them hard on the various cabinets in the van on my way out. A pole I used to prop up my canopy was strangely out of place in the middle of the floor and broken at the ends. I've never had any form of night terrors or sleepwalking before this, except for one incident also near Mount Rainier National Park a few months ago. My friends and I were driving through Enumclaw, trying to find a camping spot we might be able to post up at. It was nighttime already, and as I said before, finding camp at night can be pretty difficult. We were driving down the same road I had taken from our recent trip. We had gotten a tip from a local about a mountain that had some good dispersed camping. We were tired and hungry and just wanted to start setting up camp. We passed a few spots, mostly mud and rock, none too level and none too appealing. We decided to pick the least muddy spot we could find, and I helped them set up their tents. It was one of my first trips in my van, and I was excited to test it out. As we were setting up camp, we heard the wind blowing ominously through the trees, causing them to creak loudly, threatening us with a fall. In this particular area of the mountain is very unlevel in the most unsettling way, so thus we referred to this campsite as the ominous slant. When we slept that night, a few things of note happened. My friend Melissa claims to have heard squeaking noises, as if someone were wearing a latex bodysuit. She compared it to the happy hamster meme. Her boyfriend Kurt swears he heard a bear that night.
However, the worst of it was when, in the middle of the night, they both heard me yell bloody murder from my van. Kurt rushed out of the tent, tripping a few times in his haste, and rushed over to and swung open the door, but I was asleep. He asked what was wrong. He thought that someone was attacking me. I had no idea what he was talking about. I have no memory at all of any nightmares preceding it or anything. I have no idea what any of this means. I've been on many trips in the van since with people, and nothing like this has ever happened anywhere else. It has only happened when I've been in and around Mount Rainier National Park. To be honest, thinking about the feeling of drowning in darkness makes me feel very much not want to revisit the subject anytime soon, so I don't believe I'll be visiting the park anytime soon for camping either.
I was attacked, but I don't remember anything about it. Let me start by saying the story I'm about to share happened almost exactly 4 years ago. There are a lot of things I do not remember, so some of the information was told to me by others after the fact. That being said, everything is true and really did happen to me. I apologize ahead of time as I know it will be quite lengthy. In 2020, during the pandemic, I just moved into a really cool old second-floor apartment on my town square. It was the first time I think I'd ever lived completely alone my entire life, and I was truly in love with the place. One day in late July, I had left to go shopping and had locked my apartment, something my mother had practically pounded into me from my childhood. I never left my doors and windows unlocked. When I got home from shopping, I noticed a few things weren't where I thought I left them, and I mentioned this to my cousin Michelle. I told her I thought someone might have been in my apartment while I was gone. After discussing it with her, we came to the conclusion that I must have just forgotten I had moved the items myself, and didn't think about it again. A couple nights later, I was up watching scary movies until about 2 in the morning when I decided to get ready for bed. I remember walking into my bathroom to change into PJs and do my nightly routine. That is the last thing I remember until I woke up the next day. When I got out of bed, I immediately noticed something wrong with the clothes I had on. They were those PJ shorts that had the drawstrings around the waist. I always tied the drawstrings to make them fit, but when I stood up, the drawstrings looked like they had broken. They were still tied and were practically falling off of me. I told myself I must have moved around a lot in my sleep and the string must have snapped or something. I headed to the bathroom for my morning routine. When I walked by my bathroom mirror, I turned to look at myself and I didn't see anything wrong, but I felt really weird. Out of sorts, I guess you'd say. Even more so than usual after I first wake up. The longer I was awake, the stranger I started to feel. I noticed I had a headache and my vision was kind of blurry. I went to grab my phone from my nightstand to check what time it was, but I guess I'd forgotten to charge it before going to bed because my phone was dead. I took my phone to the living room and found the charger and plugged it in. I stood there and waited for my phone to come on. When it finally did come back on, I was completely shocked to find out it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. This was highly unusual for me because no matter what time I go to bed, I usually wake up around 7 or 8 in the morning. This is when I began feeling slightly panicked. Like I said, this was not normal for me. I began rubbing my face in my hands, and that's when I felt something was wrong with my face. I ran back to the bathroom mirror. This time when I looked into the mirror, I discovered my vision was so blurry that I couldn't even see my face. No matter how close I got to the mirror, it looked like a dense fog, or like when you take a super hot shower and the mirror fogs over, except that I had not run any hot water at all. This is when I realized something was very, very wrong with me. I was disoriented and confused. I walked back into my living room to check and see if my phone had charged enough so I could call a family member or friend to come over. The phone was only at 5%, but I decided I'd just keep it plugged in and try to call Michelle or my son. I picked up the phone and then stared at it. I could not remember how to use my phone to call or text anyone. I knew that I knew how to use my phone, but for some reason I did not have the ability. I was beginning to get very upset and scared, but most of all frustrated, because I knew that I knew how to use this phone, but my brain would not register that I did at all. Soon after this, a flood of messages and missed calls came through, and I was finally able to text a friend and told them that I was having some sort of an emergency and I needed to contact my sister to get someone to my apartment ASAP. My sister lives in an independent living facility because she was born with CP and could not walk. She relies on a wheelchair to get around. I knew she would not be able to physically help me, but could get a hold of my son. I was becoming more confused the longer I was awake. My sister had gotten a hold of my son and he was on his way. I thought I should probably go downstairs to unlock the door to the stairway, but I was feeling so strange and off balance that I sat on the steps and inched my way down. The door was already unlocked, and in my confusion, I actually locked the door. I went back upstairs the way I went down by sitting and inching my way back up. Soon I received a call from my son telling me the door was locked and he could not get inside. So I had to repeat the entire process all over again. I opened the door. My son, along with his girlfriend and my 7-month-old granddaughter, took one look at me and his eyes widened in shock and he said, "Jesus Christ, Mother, what happened to your face?" I had no idea what he was talking about. I went back to the bathroom mirror and discovered a horrific sight. I had a goose egg in the middle of my forehead the size of a tennis ball, and my right eye was completely swollen shut, and it had one hell of a black eye. My left eye was partially swollen as well. It certainly explained why I slept for 14 hours straight, all the confusion, the headache, and blurry vision I was experiencing. I informed my son of everything that I had done that I remembered since going to bed the night before, but I did leave out the fact that the drawstring of my shorts had been broken. Michelle also showed up and told me I need to go to the ER and get checked out, as we kept discovering other injuries on me besides just the goose egg and black eye. I had bruises in the shape of large fingerprints on my upper arms. They were not my own. I'm tiny, 5 foot tall, and only weigh 117 pounds. It sort of looked like someone had been sitting in front of me, facing me, and had grabbed my arms to shake me or something. Then we noticed I had red marks around both my wrists and both of my ankles. I also had rug burn type injuries on my shins and knees. I was very confused still, and I have absolutely no memory of what took place in those 14 hours I was sleeping. It's just a nothingness, a black hole in my memory. Even when I try to remember now, which I don't force but do think about on occasion. I was taken to the local hospital, which is really nothing more than a glorified Band-Aid station. The nurse practitioner on call kept asking me what happened, even though I kept telling her I had no idea. Maybe I fell or something. She then asked if I was in a relationship with someone, and I informed her I was single. I wasn't seeing anyone at the time.
She did not believe me and had the nurse call the police. I was confused, so I get why she didn't believe me. But then I said, "Well, if you don't remember what happened, there's not much I can do. But I can tell you with 100% certainty that you did not cause these injuries. Someone did this to you." The police never came in to talk to me, and I was discharged into the care of Michelle. I couldn't be left alone due to my condition, so it was arranged that I would be staying the night with Michelle and my Aunt Kay. I was told if I started getting nauseated or began vomiting, or my confusion and headache got worse, to call an ambulance immediately. That's what ended up happening. About 2 hours later, I was horribly dizzy, and I had tried to eat something because by then it had been over 24 hours since I had eaten anything. They got me something to eat, and I began hallucinating. At first, it was just auditory hallucinations. I was sitting with my aunt on her bed watching TV when all of a sudden, I noticed that the movie we were watching had completely different dialogue. I didn't remember being in this particular movie. Then the characters in the movie began directly speaking to me. I don't remember what they were saying, and I kept glancing between the TV and my aunt to see if she was hearing the same thing I was. I was totally aware that I was hallucinating, but I had absolutely no control over it. Then the paranoia started. My daughter called to check on me. She lives in a different town, and even though I was on the phone with her, I was convinced she, along with several other family members, were all outside of the house talking about me. That's when I started vomiting, and my cousin called 911. When the ambulance showed up, the police also showed up, and they were talking to my cousin. When they asked me what hospital I wanted to go to, I told them the name, and my cousin, who knew me very well, knew I would never ask to go to that particular hospital. A story for another time. But because I seemed with it enough to the paramedics, and I kept insisting that is where I wanted to go, that's where they had to take me. I wish now that they had listened to her, because it was incredibly late at night, and the hospital I was taken to was 25 minutes away. No one in my family met me at the hospital, and the hospital did not even try to call my family for information. I don't remember what I did or what I said to anyone after that. I was so confused and hallucinating that it must have been bad, as I was committed to the hospital psych floor over a traumatic brain injury for 11 days. 11 days. Also, another story for another time. Maybe I'll write a part 2 to this because it's also incredibly long. I still to this day have no recollection of what happened to me, but I really don't want to remember, seeing as all the medical professionals and my own healthcare providers who saw my injury say that I had to have been attacked by someone.
It's scary to think of all the possibilities. Was someone actually hiding in my house that night without me knowing? Could it have been one of the carnival workers I saw walking around the town square earlier that day? Worst yet, was it someone I know and still have in my life now? I'm not sure which is worse, not knowing at all or having the memories of it forever. If you have read this entire post, thank you. I have also been very reluctant to share the story, but I also find writing out all the details I do remember to be very therapeutic in a way. I've always been afraid of our garbage disposal, but I trusted my wife. My wife has insomnia and does chores when she can't sleep. It's been that way for so long that I've stopped noticing. Usually, I don't even wake up, but a few nights in a row, she started running the garbage disposal a lot, off and on throughout the night, sometimes for a minute or two. Of course, I couldn't sleep through that. So, late one night, I went downstairs to check on her. She was in her PJs and bent over the sink, staring into the drain. She was leaning in so close that some of her hair had piled up in the bottom of the sink. "You lose something?" I asked. She gasped and snapped up when she heard me. "You scared me," she said. She did look jumpy, which made me uneasy too. I saw that she was holding something and asked her what it was. "Nothing, slice of turkey," she said guiltily. She had balled it up into a gray-pink blob from squeezing it so hard. "It doesn't go in the garbage disposal," I said. I didn't know what else to say. "Right," she said. "Sorry, I'm half asleep." She dropped it into the trash under the sink. There was a pack of sliced turkey on the counter, already half eaten. Why did we have it? I was the one who ate lunch meat, but I hated turkey. I don't remember telling her to pick up any. "Hungry?" she asked. She had seen where I was looking. "No," I said. My body had gone cold. Something felt seriously wrong here. She nonchalantly turned around and put the lunch meat back in the fridge. Then, with her back still facing me, she said, "Actually, I did lose something in the sink. A gemstone in my ring." She turned around and shrugged. "I'm an idiot. Sorry." "Which did you lose?" I asked, trying to sound nice. I never talked to her when she was in one of her insomnia spells. It was more like she was sleepwalking, or as if I were talking to a stranger, a woman who only looked like my wife and had wandered into my house. "A little one," she said, pointing at her ring. "You wouldn't have noticed it. It's really small. You can barely even see it where it's supposed to go." I doubted that I wouldn't have noticed it. I bought her the ring, but the kitchen was too dark for me to see clearly. "You want me to fish it out for you?" I said. She smiled. "Sure," I said, going over to the sink. I felt a sudden panicked urge to run back upstairs, but I pushed that feeling down. I loved my wife. I trusted her, even when she was maybe half asleep. I reached my hand inside the drain. It was damp and warmer in there than I had expected.
The bumpy edge of the blade was almost hot. The metal must have heated up from the garbage disposal running for so long. "It's really small," she said. She came over to watch and leaned against the wall. The switch for the garbage disposal was right next to her shoulder. I almost told her to be careful, but didn't. I didn't want to seem controlling. She smiled again. I poked around the sides of the garbage disposal container. Everything I touched was soggy and soft, old scraps of food. The container felt like it was made of rubber. I thought it would be maybe metal or hard plastic, but the sides gave slightly when I pushed. They were strangely warm. My wife was watching me intensely, her shoulder now on the edge of the light switch panel. My finger brushed something hard, and she moved her arm, the arm that was on the switch, and I ripped my hand out of the drain. "What?" she asked. "Did you cut yourself?" "I'm fine," I managed to say, my voice shaking. Was she really going to flip the switch? "Are you?" she asked. "Yes, I'm fine. I couldn't find anything. Sorry." "That's okay," she said, yawning. She went back up to bed. She moved slowly, oblivious to her surroundings. Maybe she was sleepwalking. I followed her upstairs and found her already asleep. I couldn't make myself get to bed with her. None of it had made any sense. Her running the disposal, her lie about the ring. So I snuck back downstairs. The sink looked the same as before. A few drops of water around the rim, a waxy smear of grease on the stainless steel. I put my hands on either side of the drain and stared into the black hole. There was nothing unusual about it, other than the vague threat of something sharp hiding out of sight in the dark. But then I heard a low, soft gurgling sound in the drain. I bent over and lowered my ear to the drain to listen better. Maybe it was water moving through the pipes, but this sounded more organic, like a gurgling sound a baby might make. And I realized that my ear felt warm. Warm air was wafting out of the rim every few seconds, as if the hole were breathing. I pulled away from the sink. Nothing came chasing after me. Just to see what happened, I got a slice of turkey and pushed it down the drain with my finger. As soon as the meat had slipped past the drain flaps, the garbage disposal roared to life. The metallic grinding noise rattled through the house. I probably screamed, but I couldn't hear anything over the harsh, wet grating sound. Finally, it stopped. My heart pounding, I took all the turkey that was left and dropped it down the drain, then got a wooden spoon and pushed it down into the hole. The garbage disposal turned back on again, and I ripped the spoon out. The end was gnawed to splinters. I'm not sure how long I stood there watching the drain and listening to the blade chew up the meat. Maybe a minute? Then the faucet was running too. My wife was there. She had come down without me noticing. The water gushed loudly into the drain and choked on the pipes. The garbage disposal soon stopped, and she turned off the water. "The water helps the food go down," she explained. I was too stunned to move, and she grabbed me by the arms, talking so quickly I couldn't get a word in. It started a few nights ago when she had fed the drain some crumbs in the counter. Then she fed it more and noticed that it liked meat, so she got more meat. Whatever it was, the thing down in the drain, whatever it was doing, growing, nesting, it was getting more active because of the food, which meant it was getting hungrier, which meant more food. She apologized for putting so many groceries on the card, but it had been worth it. She had tamed the thing. That's why I knew you'd be safe earlier. She got a bag of sugar out of the pantry, wet her hand under the faucet, and dunked it into the bag. She pulled her hand out, and it was completely covered in sugar. Then she stuck her hand down the drain. "Stop!" I screamed. She pulled her hand back out. It was perfectly fine and perfectly clean. Not a speck of sugar left. "See," she said, "it won't bite. It feels good." She sugared up her hand again and stuck it back down the drain. I let her. I was curious, honestly, more curious than afraid. And then my hand went into the drain. There was a loud, sickening crunch. I remember that, but I don't remember anything after, or even how. The pain, the adrenaline and shock blocked everything out. I must have somehow tied a tourniquet on and called an ambulance. It's funny, I close my eyes and I can't even picture the stump. It's still wrapped up. Or the blood. There must have been lots of blood, but it's all cleaned up now and I can't picture any of it. Nobody can find the hand anywhere. Nobody can find my wife either. She took the cash, the jewelry, the second car, all of it, mine. The cops put out an alert for the car. I don't know, it's all so screwed up. Today, a plumber came by to check out the garbage disposal. He had never seen anything like it. The shredder and motor never got installed. It's basically an empty container sitting under the drain. And you said it was working, he asked, doubtfully. Yeah, I told him. My wife used it for years.
And scary to think of all the possibilities. Was someone actually hiding in my house that night without me knowing? Could it have been one of the carnival workers I saw walking around the town square earlier that day? Worst yet, was it someone I know and still have in my life now? I'm not sure which is worse, not knowing it all or having the memories of it forever. If you have read this entire post, thank you. I've also been very reluctant to share the story, but I also find writing out all the details I do remember to be very therapeutic in a way. I've always been afraid of our garbage disposal, but I trusted my wife. My wife has insomnia and does chores when she can't sleep. It's been that way for so long that I've stopped noticing. Usually I don't even wake up. But a few nights in a row, she started running the garbage disposal a lot, off and on throughout the night, sometimes for a minute or two. Of course, I couldn't sleep through that. So late one night, I went downstairs to check on her. She was in her PJs and bent over the sink, staring into the drain. She was leaning in so close that some of her hair had piled up in the bottom of the sink. "You lose something?" I asked. She gasped and snapped up when she heard me. "You scared me," she said. She did look chumpy, which made me uneasy too. I saw that she was holding something and asked her what it was. "Nothing. A slice of turkey?" she said. She had balled it up into a gray-pink blob from squeezing it so hard. "It doesn't go in the garbage disposal," I said. I didn't know what else to say. "Right," she said. "Sorry, I'm half asleep." She dropped it into the trash under the sink. There was a pack of sliced turkey on the counter, already half eaten. Why did we have it? I was the one who ate lunch meat, but I hated turkey. I don't remember telling her to pick up any. "Hungry?" she asked. She had seen where I was looking. "No," I said. My body had gone cold. Something felt seriously wrong here. She nonchalantly turned around and put the lunch meat back in the fridge. Then, with her back still facing me, she said, "Actually, I did lose something in the sink, a gemstone in my ring." She turned around and shrugged. "I'm an idiot. Sorry." "Which did you lose?" I asked, trying to sound nice. I never talked to her when she was in one of her insomnia spells. It was more like she was sleepwalking, or as if I were talking to a stranger, a woman who only looked like my wife and had wandered into my house. "A little one. Right here," she said, pointing at a ring. "You wouldn't have noticed it. It's really small. You can barely even see it where it's supposed to go." I doubted that I wouldn't have noticed it. I bought her the ring, but the kitchen was too dark for me to see clearly. "You want me to fish it out for you?" She smiled. "Sure," I said, going over to the sink. I felt a sudden panicked urge to run back upstairs, but I pushed that feeling down. I loved my wife. I trusted her even when she was maybe half asleep. I reached my hand inside the drain. It was damp and warmer in there than I had expected. The bumpy edge of the blade was almost hot. The metal must have heated up from the garbage disposal running for so long. "It's really small," she said. She came over to watch and leaned against the wall. The switch for the garbage disposal was right next to her shoulder. I almost told her to be careful, but didn't. I didn't want to seem controlling. She smiled again at me. I poked around the sides of the garbage disposal container. Everything I touched was soggy and soft, old scraps of food. The container felt like it was made of rubber. I thought it would be maybe metal or hard plastic, but the sides gave slightly when I pushed. They were strangely warm. My wife was watching me intensely, her shoulder now on the edge of the light switch panel.
My finger brushed something hard, and she moved her arm, the arm that was on the switch, and I ripped my hand out of the drain.
What?
She asked. Did you cut yourself? I'm fine, I managed to say, my voice shaking. Was she really going to flip the switch? You are? She asked. Yes, I'm fine. I couldn't find anything. Sorry.
That's okay,
she said, yawning. She went back up to bed. She moved slowly, oblivious to her surroundings. Maybe she was sleepwalking. I followed her upstairs and found her already asleep. I couldn't make myself get to bed with her. None of it had made any sense. Her running the disposal, her lie about the ring. So I snuck back downstairs. The sink looked the same as before. A few drops of water around the rim, a waxy smear of grease on the stainless steel. I put my hands on either side of the drain and stared into the black hole. There was nothing unusual about it, other than the vague threat of something sharp hiding out of sight in the dark. But then I heard a low, soft gurgling sound in the drain. I bent over and lowered my ear to the drain to listen better. Maybe it was water moving through the pipes, but this sounded more organic, like the gurgling sound a baby might make. And I realized that my ear felt warm. Warm air was wafting out of the rim every few seconds, as if the hole were breathing. I pulled away from the sink. Nothing came chasing after me. Just to see what happened, I got a slice of turkey and pushed it down the drain with my finger. As soon as the meat had slipped past the drain flaps, the garbage disposal roared to life. The metallic grinding noise rattled through the house. I probably screamed, but I couldn't hear anything over the harsh, wet, grating sound. Finally, it stopped. My heart pounding, I took all the turkey that was left and dropped it down the drain. Then got a wooden spoon and pushed it down into the hole. The garbage disposal turned back on again, and I ripped the spoon out. The end was gnawed to splinters. I'm not sure how long I stood there, watching the drain and listening to the blade chew up the meat. Maybe a minute? Then the faucet was running too. My wife was there. She had come down without me noticing. The water gushed loudly into the drain and choked on the pipes. The garbage disposal soon stopped, and she turned off the water. The water helps the food go down, she explained. I was too stunned to move, and she grabbed me by the arms, talking so quickly I couldn't get a word in. It had started a few nights ago when she had fed the drains some crumbs from the counter. Then she fed it more and noticed that it liked meat, so she got more meat. Whatever it was, the thing down in the drain, whatever it was doing, growing, nesting, it was getting more active because of the food, and that meant it was getting hungrier, which meant more food. She apologized for putting so many groceries on the card, but it had been worth it. She had tamed it. That's why I knew you'd be safe earlier. I'll show you. She got a bag of sugar out of the pantry, wet her hand under the faucet, and dunked it into the bag. She pulled her hand back out. It was completely fine and completely clean, not a speck of sugar left. See, she said, he won't bite. It feels good. She sugared up her hand again and stuck it back down the drain. It kind of tickles, and it's so warm. I couldn't speak. You want to try? She asked. She got my hand wet under the faucet too and dunked it into the sugar. I let her. I was curious, honestly. More curious than afraid. And then my hand went into the drain. There was a loud, sickening crunch. I remember that, but I don't remember anything after, or even how. The pain, the adrenaline, and shock blocked everything out. I must have somehow tied a tourniquet on and called an ambulance. It's funny. I close my eyes and I can't even picture the stump. It's still wrapped up. Or the blood. There must have been lots of blood, but it's all cleaned up now. And I can't picture any of it. Nobody could find the hand anywhere. Nobody can find my wife either. She took the cash, the jewelry, the second car. All of it. Mine. The cops put out an alert for the car. I don't know. It's all so screwed up. Today, a plumber came by to check out the garbage disposal. He had never seen anything like it. The shredder and motor were never installed. It's basically an empty container sitting under the drain. And you said it was working? He asked doubtfully. Yeah, I told him. My wife used it for years.
My friends and I attended a trivia night. The questions progressively got weirder. Thursday is trivia night. Every Thursday, 4 friends and I meet up at a local restaurant that hosts weekly trivia games. With all of us being young adults that recently graduated from college, trivia is a great way for us to stay connected, despite all of us being real adults with real jobs now. Every week, we go to the restaurant, Benny's, and sit at the same booth. We participate in 5 categories of trivia, with each category having 5 questions. We drink, laugh, answer the questions, and usually win or at least place second. This is the routine that we had followed for the past few months. Until the group chat got a text from Henry. Have you guys ever heard of Lucy's Bar? I read the message and instantly went to look it up on Google Maps. Nothing came up in the search bar except some recommendations for other bars or establishments that started with an L. I typed out my response. No. Where is that? Someplace over by Fairmont Avenue? I got an ad in my mail advertising trivia at this place on Thursday. Maybe we check out a new spot? I frowned when reading that. Personally, I love the status quo and hate change, even when it comes down to something as simple as where we attended trivia night. But before I could respond, Al sent a text. I'd be down to try a new place. It gets boring when we always win every week at Benny's. Well, if Alice wants to try the new place, then Jenny will side with her. That only leaves me and Morgan. I had to respond before he did. We're going to give Gary a heart attack if we don't show up Benny's tomorrow. We're there every week. Gary is the head bartender. He'll usually let us get away with 1 round of beers for free. Come on, it'll be fun to try a new place. Henry really seemed to want to try this new place. Before I could formulate a response, Morgan finally chimed in. What's the harm in skipping Benny's for 1 week? We'll see if the trivia here is fun, and if it's not, at least we tried somewhere new. And that settled it. The following evening, I drove slowly down Fairmont as I squinted at the building looking for a sign advertising Lucy's Bar. We don't live in a small town, but I've lived here long enough to be pretty familiar with the businesses that line the street. I'd never heard of this place before, so I figured it must be new. After parking on the side of the road, I began to wander down the sidewalk. When I reached the last building, I turned to the group chat for help. Where is this place? Go around the side of the bank building. There's a sign pointing to the stairs. The bar is down there. Sure enough, once I rounded the corner of the building for the bank, I saw a bright neon sign with an arrow pointing down the stairs. No wonder I'd never seen this place. I followed the stairs and found all 4 of my friends already seated at a table. I scanned the place while walking over to them. It looked like an average bar. 1 bartender stood behind the counter of the bar, and there's a mix of regular tables, high-top tables, and booths along the wall. There weren't many others, just a few groups of people scattered about. I greeted my friends as I slid in next to Henry at the booth. I never knew this place was here. I neither until I got the ad, he shrugged. I didn't know of any other places that host trivia. I thought it might be fun. I think we'll have a good chance of winning, Alice whispered, while Jenny nodded her head in agreement. We're the biggest group here. While we waited for our appetizers and drinks to come out, I looked more closely at the other groups. There were 2 groups of couples seated at different tables, 2 trios, and 1 group of 4 that were also in booths around us. Around a few minutes, our food was brought out. I could now see a name tag on the woman who was waiting on us. Are you the Lucy that owns the bar? The one and only, she replied with a wink. She looked like she was in her 40s and had on the brightest red lipstick that I've ever seen. We'll get trivia going here in just a moment. I watched as she went into the kitchen, and a moment later she emerged and sat on one of the stools at the bar. She had a handful of cards with her that she laid down on the countertop before clearing her throat. So what does the winning team get? I asked Henry, not exactly sure. The ad just listed the location for trivia, he replied with a shrug. All right, everyone. We're going to get started. There should be multiple sheets of paper on your table, as well as a couple of pencils. After each question, you write down your answer and then bring it up to me. It was similar to our normal trivia in this sense that there were 5 rounds of 5 questions, but bringing up the answer after every question seemed a bit tedious. After everyone turned in their answer, Lucy would repeat the question, tell us the answer, and then grant the points to the teams who answered correctly. Oddly enough, I did end up enjoying getting to hear the answers sooner rather than at the end of the round. The first round was general trivia, generic questions about the year that this product came out or who wrote that great American novel. The second round covered sports, then the third round covered geography. The first question related to the Pacific Ocean, and the second question related to a country in Europe. Then Lucy asked the third question. "Where can you find hell?" she asked. My friends and I exchanged glances with each other. "Like, as an actual hell?" Morgan asked. "Where would you find hell?" Lucy repeated, grinning at us. "What are we supposed to say? Under the earth? The earth's core?" Henry asked. Alice shrugged. "I'm good with putting the core of the earth." So that is what we wrote down. Henry brought the slip of paper up to Lucy, who read it and smiled. After the last group brought up their paper, Lucy prepared to give us the answer. "Where would you find hell?" "Well, you'd hop in your car and drive over to Michigan, where you'd find the tiny unincorporated town of Hell," she laughed. All of the tables also let out little laughs now as the question made more sense. The 2 next questions were normal geography questions. Lucy listed the placings of each team, and my group was in first, but only by a couple of points. Then we got to round 4. "Time for round 4, Lucy exclaimed, clapping her hands together. "Name this 2005 horror film that Keanu Reeves starred in." Everyone immediately turned to Henry, the horror film buff in our group. "Constantine," he whispered, and Jenny wrote it down. She had been tasked with writing the answer since she had the neatest handwriting. After everyone turned in their answers, Lucy confirmed that Constantine was the correct answer. Next question. "Who do you like the least in your group?" My friends and I looked at each other, and then at Lucy to see if she was being serious. "Who do you like the least in your group? There's no right or wrong answer, but you will not get a point if you don't turn in a real answer," she explained. "What? What kind of question is that?" Morgan asked. "Yeah, I'm not writing anything down," said Jenny. "If you choose not to write an answer, you will not receive any points, and it's in your best interest to get as many points as possible so you can win, of course." We all sat in awkward silence, waiting to see if anyone would bring up their paper to Lucy. No one did. "Well," Lucy chuckled, "you guys get a pass with that one, but moving forward, if you do not bring up a real answer, you will get docked points." Next question. "Who in your group would you sacrifice if you had no choice?" Complete silence filled the bar. "I think I've had enough of these questions," Morgan said. "I'm done with this." The rest of us voiced our agreement and began to put our cash to pay so we didn't have to wait for a bill to ring up. "I'm afraid that no one can leave until trivia is complete," she said in a sympathetic voice that did not seem sincere. "I don't think you can really stop us," said a man from one of the couples that was sitting at a high-top table. He was putting his coat on while his wife grabbed her purse. Lucy was silent as we watched the couple walk up the stairs. Once at the top, we couldn't see them anymore, but we heard the sound of a door attempting to be pulled open, followed by cursing. Flustered, the man ran back down the stairs. "The door is fucking locked! Open the door!" he shouted at Lucy. "I told you that no one may leave until trivia is over," she clucked. "Please return to your table so we may continue." "We should be allowed to leave if we want to," Morgan told her as we all stood awkwardly around the table. Everyone else was murmuring in agreement, trying to figure out what to do. "The rules are the rules. Once you begin trivia, you must play all the way through. I highly recommend continuing your participation because the first place group will win a very promising prize." "We can't keep us locked in here," said a man from a different group. "There's no other way out of the bar," Lucy told him. And the murmurs at each table slowly began to turn into panic. "All I ask is that you finish trivia. That's it.
We all looked around at each other. Alice looked at her phone and groaned in frustration. Of course we don't have service in here. It seems like we have to tough it out and finish the trivia. We're already on the 4th round. We only have about 6 questions left, said Henry, disgruntled. The couple seemed to also come to the conclusion as they returned to their table and we all sat back down. You all have 1 minute to submit your answer for the previous question. If you fail to turn in the paper with a real answer, you will be docked a point, Lucy told us. She doesn't know any of us, I whispered to my friends. Let's just put a random name and turn it in. Jenny nodded and wrote something down before bringing it to Lucy. After the minute was up, only 3 of the other groups had turned their papers in. Lucy reviewed the slips and tallied the points. Sadly, none of you get points for this round. Some of you failed to turn in an answer, while the groups that did submit an answer chose not to truthfully name a member of the group. You all get docked 2 points. How the fuck did she know that? I whispered to everyone, who all stared it back at me with wide eyes. Next question. Last one in this round. What is the worst sin you've ever committed? Since there's more than one person in each group, I expect 1 answer for each person. Your points still count towards your overall group score, but you can get more points if everyone answers truthfully. We all sat there speechless. Do we try to leave again? Jenny asked. I wouldn't, Lucy said, red lips stretched into a wide grin. Just finish it out. There's only 1 round left. Your group is in the lead, and it is in your best interest to keep it that way. Why do you keep saying that? What does the first prize win? A girl from one of the trio tables asked. You'll find out soon enough. If I were you, I'd work very hard to try to take that first place spot. Now, let's turn in those answers. The girls from the table ignored her and walked over to the staircase anyway. We heard them pushing against the door, but apparently to no avail as they returned gloomily downstairs a minute later. Well, somehow she knows if we're lying, so we have to turn in the right answer, Alice said, about the worst sin we've ever committed. That's a fucked up question, Morgan retorted. Clearly this woman is whack, but we have to turn in our own answer. We don't have to look at each other's answers, but I think we should just answer truthfully, Henry reasoned. Fuck it, yeah, I just want to get out of here. Let's turn in our answers. I pondered for a moment. What is the worst sin I've ever committed? I cheated on my partner in high school. I felt really awful about that for a long time. Obviously, we weren't married or anything, but I wrote down adultery/cheating on my slip of paper and turned it in. Lucy snatched the paper from my hand and after a moment, winked at me. I walked back to the table and sat down. After everyone had reluctantly turned their answers in, the room sat in an eerie silence while Lucy examined the papers and wrote down the scores. She proceeded to list out the ranking of groups by points, and our group still held the lead. We have made it to the last category. First question, what is your deepest fear? Well, not a fun question, but it wasn't as awful as a sacrifice question. The rest of the round proceeded with bizarre questions, including, who do you hate the most in your life? If you had to kill someone, how would you do it? Which circle of hell in Dante's Inferno would you be sent to? And we finished with the grand finale question of, will you return to trivia at Lucy's? My answer was simply a fuck no. After the last group turned in their paper for the last question, I let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. The same guy who tried to leave earlier stood up again. Can we leave now? Trivia is finished. I haven't yet announced the winners, Lucy replied without looking up from her score sheet. I don't care who won, we want to leave, he told her. Well, the winners get to leave first, she said in response. She listed the rankings again, with the duos finishing last, then one of the trios. Third place went to the other trio. Second place went to the group of 4. And my team was announced as the winners. Congratulations, Lucy said, beaming toward our table. You all get to leave first. Second place gets to choose 3 people to leave, and third place gets to choose 1 person to leave. Everyone who had been gathering in their things stopped in their tracks. Forget that, we're leaving, said one of the girls in the duo that finished last. Lucy stood to her feet. "No," is all she said. "You can't stop us," the other girl said, and the two of them headed towards the stairs. The bartender, who had been silently cleaning glasses at the counter, now stood at the foot of the stairs, blocking them. "Let us through," the first girl demanded. The man stared at her silently. He lifted his jacket up to reveal a gun tucked inside the waistband of his pants. The girl shrieked and ran back to the table, while everyone else descended into panic mode. "Quiet down," Lucy yelled so loudly that it stunned everyone into silence. "First place group gets to leave first. My second and third place groups, you have 2 minutes to decide who goes and who stays, or else you will all stay." "Guys, let's get the fuck out of here," I whispered, and we all hurried towards the stairs. The man moved slightly to let us through, and we all clambered up the stairs. I reached the door first, and I held my breath as I pushed it. Thankfully, it opened. We stumbled into the chilly night air and backed away from the staircase. "We have to call the police, right?" Alice asked, and she had already had her phone out and unlocked. Yeah, Morgan said, watching the staircase. "What just happened?" Jenny whispered, staring at the ground. What did she mean when she said that the second and third place groups had to choose who got to leave? No one answered. A moment later, another 3 people emerged from the staircase and came over to us. "We left Adam in there," one of the girls said, tears streaming down her face. "Please tell me you called for help." "We did," Alice assured her. "The police are coming." We watched the doorway to see if one person from the trio would have come outside, but no one did. No one said a word as we all stared at the staircase, hoping that someone would appear from the hellhole of a bar. After a few minutes, smoke began creeping up the stairwell and rising into the open air. "Hey, I think there's a fire," Henry exclaimed, and he and I ran towards the staircase. We quickly descended the steps and tried to tackle the door, but it was shut firmly. One of the guys from the other group followed us. We all tried to kick the door in. We heard banging on the other side of the door and the faint cries of those trapped inside. "There's got to be a way we can get this door open," I said to them, pulling my shirt over my nose and mouth. The panic cries of those trapped in the bar were growing louder. "With what? There's nothing around here we can use to try and bust down the door," he said miserably. "We need to get away from the smoke. My friend is in there. She said we had to leave someone or we'd all have to stay, and Adam told us to go and get help. I promised we'd go back for him." The guy began to weep. "Help should be here soon," I said, but even I didn't believe that help would come in time for this guy's friend because the stench of burning meat began to fill my nose. I think the others smelled it too because we all trudged back up the stairs. I couldn't bring myself to look at the agonized faces of the group that left their friend down there. Another few minutes went by before we heard the sirens approaching. "Should we get out to the street? I'm not sure if they'll know we're back here," Jenny said. We agreed and followed her around the side of the building to the main street. The members of the other group followed us. They rushed over to the cops, trying to explain that their friend was inside and needed help. The responding officers, realizing the gravity of the situation, followed us back around the building towards the staircase. But something was different. The neon sign that labeled the bar was now gone. Weeds and vines were covering the railing that surrounded the hole in the ground where the stairs were. "This some kind of prank?" one officer asked, skeptically. "Yes," one of the girls cried. "We were down in there to play trivia and the lady was being weird with her questions, and then she wouldn't let her friend leave. There are other groups of people with us too, and they got trapped in there. I smelled smoke and we tried, but you couldn't get the door open." The officers clearly did not believe me, and how could they? I'd also find it hard to believe that an entire bar disappeared in a matter of minutes. After they took all of our statements individually, they addressed us all together. "I'm not sure what's going on here, but all of your statements match up. I can tell you that nothing has been down there for several years, let alone a bar. We'll keep looking for your missing friend and keep an eye out for any missing persons reported in the area," an officer said. I don't really remember getting home that night. The next few days are a blur. Every Thursday, I drive to the site where we had that trivia night, only to find that it still remains a decrepit old basement. My hope is that when Lucy's bar reappears, I'll be there to ward off anyone who thinks they're going in for a fun night out.
And my advice for you is if you ever find yourself participating at a trivia night in a new place that you're unfamiliar with, make sure you win.